Welcome to the fourth installment of the ADP show from all of us over at DynastyLeagueFootball.com. I'm Dan Myler. With me, as always, Ryan McDowell. Ryan, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Dan. Doing well.
Good. We're going to do as we have over the last few weeks, talk about some of the ADP that you collect for us over at DynastyLeagueFootball.com. And we've been listening to those comments on the bottom of each thread, each episode that we do, talking about how they're excited. Our watchers, our listeners, they're excited for some SUPERFLEX ADP. So we thought we'd splash in a little bit of the SUPERFLEX knowledge that we have over at DLF.
Yeah, absolutely. We've gotten some reminders about how popular and how prevalent SUPERFLEX leagues are becoming. And Dan, I know we both love to hear that from our viewers because we love those leagues. That's what we play in mostly. So to hear a push and a desire for that SUPERFLEX data as well, we love to hear it, and we've got it. That's the best part.
For those of you watching, tuning in, if you're a regular over here, thank you for checking us out. You can hit that like button, hit the subscribe button so you can check us out every week. Also check out DynastyLeagueFootball.com. Lots of great content, including that ADP that we talk about on the show. Also, Ryan and I both do rankings. We splash in articles and lots of other content. We're both co-hosts of the DLF Dynasty podcast as well. Ryan's a partner. I'm a senior writer, but enough about us. Let's get into some of this content, some of this stuff we want to talk about. The topic this week, Ryan, is SUPERFLEX rookie ADP. As you could probably guess, the running backs and receivers, even the tight ends, they come off in the same order as what you'd expect in a regular single quarterback rookie draft, Ryan. So we're going to focus in on those quarterbacks.
Right. Yeah. We see with our SUPERFLEX ADP, we see Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Jonathan Taylor in that top tier of drafts. And kind of goes in order, as you mentioned, J.K. Dobbins and DeAndre Swift, Cam Akers, Lamb, and Judy, all coming off the board in similar order as we've discussed on previous episodes in those one quarterback drafts. But of course, it's the quarterbacks and where they're being valued. And again, this is just a really interesting year. I think most years you take those top quarterbacks, whether it's one or two or even three first rounders, and you just can assume they're going to be at the top of SUPERFLEX rookie drafts. And that's not exactly the case this year. These running backs are challenging for those top spots. The data, Dan, that I want to look at today is rookie data from SUPERFLEX drafts. But unlike some of our other data that we've talked about, this is not mock draft data. This is data that we pull from MyFantasyLeague's actual dynasty leagues that are out there. And I love that feature on DLF because you can filter to exactly what fits your league. So if you're PPR or non-PPR, one quarterback or SUPERFLEX, if you're in an IDP league, you can look at ADP data for those IDP leagues. That's a mouthful, but you can basically filter it down to whatever fits your league. That's what I did to pull some SUPERFLEX rookie data, and we've got, Dan, almost 300 drafts that have taken place. So, I've been running these mock drafts, and if you've listened to the show or if you're a subscriber over at DLF, you probably know this. We do 6 monthly startup mock drafts. We do 10 rookie mock drafts during that pre-draft time in the spring. And one complaint I hear is that the sample size is just not strong enough with 6 or 10 mock drafts. It's just not enough data. And I get that. I understand that complaint. You can't say that with this data, though. Again, we've got almost 300 actual drafts that are taking place and that we're pulling that data from. So let's go ahead and get it going here. We've got Joe Burrow as the top overall pick. He is the 101. He's in that top tier with Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Jonathan Taylor, but he is the top choice according to this data. and I think deservedly so. Dan, you and I are in a league, the DLF Podcast Listeners League, and unfortunately, I earned that top pick, and I took Joe Burrow. It is a SUPERFLEX league, and just the challenge of acquiring a starting quarterback, especially a good young starting quarterback, one we expect to be good at least. It's too great. So to be able to grab that guy and Joe Burrow, even ahead of these running backs, I think that pick makes sense.
Yeah, particularly in leagues with 12 plus members, when you're trying to find any starting quarterback, let alone a good one, or a guy with Pro Bowl or all pro kind of potential, which is really the expectation of Joe Burrow after going number 1 overall. One interesting note from that data, Ryan, there were only, out of 300 of these drafts, there were only 3 players that were selected number 1 overall: Burrow, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and Jonathan Taylor. So in these SUPERFLEX leagues, you mentioned it there, that's a tier, really. Those 3 players, Burrow went as low as 4, which is actually pretty surprising for those of us that play in a lot of these types of leagues. But no doubt, you're right, Joe Burrow belongs at the top, number 1 overall in these SUPERFLEX rookie drafts. So that makes up a tier, Ryan: Burrow, Edwards-Helaire, and Taylor. Right after that, though, we fire off another quarterback with Tua Tagovailoa. He's number 4 in ADP, goes as high as 2nd overall and as low as 8 in these types of drafts.
Yeah, we talked a lot about that top tier of 7 players in one quarterback leagues. And then when you add in Burrow and Tua, obviously that goes to a very deep top tier of 9 players. If you're sitting with a top 9 pick, you're in good shape to get one of those guys. And maybe you add in even another quarterback in that group as well. With Tua, though, you mentioned he comes in at 4th on this ADP data. I'm actually surprised at the ADP gap. You look at Taylor in the 3rd spot, his ADP is 2.75, went as high as 1 overall, as low as 4. And then Tua's ADP is 4.43. So, of course, from 3.75 to 4.43, not a huge gap. But when you're talking about those gaps at the top of the draft, that's pretty significant difference. And especially the level of player that Tua is. As I said earlier, most years we would see Burrow at 1, Tua at 2, and there wouldn't really be any argument about that. But seeing Tua not only 4th, but 4th and falling in that 2nd tier was a little surprising to me.
Yeah, that margin that you mentioned, it is surprising. And maybe the most shocking part about Tua's ADP is that maximum number that you talked about. He goes as low as 8 in a draft. And man, if you're sitting at 8 in a draft and need that quarterback in those SUPERFLEX leagues, you're probably a competing team, a playoff type team. To get Tua at 8, that is a gift. As we've talked about so much, this class is loaded with talent. After Tua at 4, we get back into those running backs with J.K. Dobbins, DeAndre Swift, and Cam Akers. After that, CeeDee Lamb and Jerry Jeudy. And then coming in at number 10, another quarterback, Justin Herbert of the Chargers.
Yeah, and Herbert is an interesting case as well because, again, normally I think we'd see him, maybe not 3, but top 5. And I know there are certainly those who would still argue he deserves to be a top 5 pick, even in this class. But in this case, based on this data, he falls to 10 overall with an ADP of 9.82. And he's certainly the end of that tier. We see a sizable gap between he and Justin Jefferson, who comes in at 11 overall. But Herbert drafted as high as 6, as low as 15. And again, these are all SUPERFLEX leagues. These are not one quarterback leagues mixing in. This is almost 300 SUPERFLEX leagues, and somebody got Justin Herbert in the 2nd round of one of those, which is pretty wild to me. Herbert, of course, drafted 6th overall by the Chargers. We have to be excited about his weapons, even if we expect him to sit for a while behind Tyrod Taylor. I think it could be argued that he's in the best situation of these 3 quarterbacks. So really, he's falling not as a result of any concern about him, I don't think, but more about the depth of this class that we've talked so much about with Judy and Lamb, Akers, etc. And again, looking back at our own draft that we're taking part in right now, he actually fell to 11. So somebody got a gift.
Yeah, that was a gift. I sat there at 9 with CeeDee Lamb staring me in the face. I needed a quarterback, passed on Justin Herbert for CeeDee Lamb. Hopefully that one works out for me. After Herbert in the ADP, Ryan, he falls at 10. Again, we go on a kind of a dry spell when it comes to these quarterbacks. You see names like Jefferson and Rager and Ruggs, Vaughn, Higgins, Mims, Pittman, Ayuk, Chenault, A.J. Dillon, and then Zach Moss. So nearly a whole round worth of players before we get that next quarterback. But there are a couple more QBs worth mentioning here for sure that are going to be right around that fringe round 2, round 3 range. And it starts at 22 overall with Jordan Love.
Right. So it does go a full round. Herbert at the 110, Jordan Love at the 210. And he's a player that had that first round talk coming into the draft. I think most expected or at least understood that there was a chance he would be a first rounder in the NFL draft. And he got that first round draft capital. But his value has dropped as a result. And it's just the uncertainty of what his near future looks like. It's safe to say we don't expect him to play very much at all in 2020 with Aaron Rodgers certainly holding down the starting job in Green Bay. And then it just becomes a waiting game of what the Packers want to do. And we saw them, almost 20 years ago, play that same game and make Rodgers wait, or I guess it's Dan, more like 15 years ago, something like that.
Yeah, right in there.
We saw them wait, and Rodgers sat for 3 years, I believe, before he saw any significant time. And I know in most of my leagues, even in Superflex leagues, he ended up on the waiver wire before he actually saw any significant playing time. And so now that's a decision that Superflex players have to make. Do I take Jordan Love with that second round pick and stick him on my bench for maybe 2 or 3 years? It's going to be a long wait.
Yeah, it's going to be a long wait. We've mentioned the highs and lows of these other players, Ryan. Love goes as high as 16, which is pretty surprising to see him in the high to mid second round. As low as 31, though. In the third round, it feels like a slam dunk, take a shot, especially if you're in a league where you feel like there's some security. This league is going to be around for a while, and you like to invest in that quarterback position. Another quarterback with really a similar situation, I guess, going to have to sit behind, but might get splashed in from time to time. That's Jalen Hurts. He comes in a few picks later at 25 overall, the first pick in the third round, Ryan.
Right, and Hurts was another player who was really getting some hype leading into the draft. There was talk he might even be a first-round NFL draft pick. That did not happen, and he also lost value as a result of his landing spot with the Eagles. He will also have to sit. But as you mentioned, maybe at least some expectations or some suggestions that maybe he'll be used in some type of other role, some type of Taysom Hill role. I don't really see that. But again, in the third round, I'm willing to take a chance. Some of the players being drafted around Love and Hurts, we're talking about Chase Claypool, Anthony McFarland, Darrington Evans, Antonio Gibson. So I really like all those players actually, but none of those are certainly sure things. So we've already talked about how difficult it is to find quarterbacks, especially young quarterbacks in Superflex leagues. Sometimes you have to make those difficult picks of a quarterback over the running back or wide receiver.
No doubt. Before we get out of here, Ryan, we should mention there are other quarterbacks that were drafted in the NFL draft. Anybody noteworthy that we should be thinking about as these Superflex rookie drafts are happening?
Sure. I think a couple others that are certainly worth looking at, worth discussing. Jacob Eason, former Washington quarterback, lands with the Colts. His ADP is 32 overall. I think that's a steal. The Colts are already talking about Phillip Rivers playing more than 1 year, but I'm not really buying that. Not necessarily a huge fan of Eason. you know, on his own coming in, but I do love the landing spot. We'll see if he gets a shot. Jake Fromm is a big name. Of course, Jake Fromm took Jacob Eason's spot at Georgia. Fromm's way down at 45 overall. He lands with Buffalo as the presumed backup to Josh Allen. So like Hurts and Love, he's a player who lost value because of that landing spot.
No doubt. Ryan, we're going to get together every week, continue to talk about all the ADP that you collect and that we pull off of all these MFL leagues. As you said, nearly 300 MFL drafts. That's where all this data came from. Thanks a lot to everybody who watched and listened. Hit that like and subscribe button. Check us out over at DynastyLeagueFootball.com. For Ryan, I'm Dan. Thanks for watching this episode of the ADP Show, brought to you by DynastyLeagueFootball.com. We'll catch you again next week.